morning, good afternoon. For those of you who are attending, this is why NAS file migrations don't have to be a nightmare anymore. My name is Marc Staimer. I am the President and Chief Dragon Slayer of Dragon Slayer Consulting. Now, I've been doing this a long time. I've been a consultant for over 18 years, and I've been in the industry more than 36 years. I work with vendors, and I work with end users. End users, I work with for free. Vendors, I help market more effectively. So if you have a question, a problem, an issue, you'd like to chat about it, you'd like to figure out how to solve it, please feel free to contact me at my email or call me or tweet me. I will respond. I respond to every request. There's a lot to cover today. We're going to talk about why NAS file migration mobility in the first place, why it's a problem, the complexity of it, common migration tools, why those projects fail, a deeper dive, what this means to your business, the budget-busting costs of file migration, workarounds and why they fail, and then Kwong Lee from Data Dynamics is going to come on and talk about a better, more complete file migration and mobility method. And then we'll finish with some Q&A. So for those of you who've heard me speak before, you know that I like to tell stories, and I'm going to start with a story here. One day a security guard is making his rounds, and he notices that the file migration and mobility administrator is on the floor. It appears to be unconscious. He races over and checks, and he can't find a pulse. So he whips out his phone and calls 911. The 911 operator comes on the line and says, "What is the nature of your emergency?" And the security guard, flummoxed at this point, says, "I don't know. Our administrator's on the floor. I think he may be dead." The 911 operator goes, "All right, sir, hold on. We can handle this. Just be calm. The first thing I want you to do is put down the phone and make sure that he's dead." He says, "Okay." He puts down the phone. The operator doesn't see anything, doesn't hear anything. Suddenly, she hears a loud bang, a gunshot. Security guard picks up the phone. He says, "Okay, now what?" Too often, our first choice may not be the best choice. Now, the reason for NAS file migration and mobility there are several crucial purposes. One is tech refresh, right? You're moving from an older system to a newer system. You could be changing vendors, or you could just be upgrading the system. But any of those cases require some file migration. Another crucial purpose is file tiering. For file aging, archiving, data protection, disaster recovery, business continuity, or compliance, there are a lot of reasons for it where you want to move your files from higher performance, higher cost storage to lower performance, lower cost storage, even the cloud storage. Another crucial purpose is consolidation. You want to reduce the number of filers or NAS systems that you have to be able to reduce the amount of management, lower costs, lower infrastructure costs. Now, in reality, file migration mobility projects tend to be complicated. They're non-trivial. You have to discover and plan and process, manage, cut over, and service those projects. And that entails a lot. A lot of expertise, often a lot of scripting, and incredible spreadsheet intensity. Why? Well, mostly because it comes down to the two most common tools utilized, which are open source Robocopy or rsync. And there are a lot of tools out there that are built around these tools, and they bring along the same problems that tools do. If you look at it, according to analyst research, most file migration and mobility projects will fail. In fact, more than 84% of the projects fail. And they fail because they're over time, they're over budget, there's poor scoping, there's inexperience, or all the above, or all but one of the above. But they typically will fail. And that doesn't matter if you're doing it yourself or you've hired a lot of professional services. You're going to have a high probability failure. Now, if we do a deeper dive on this and the rationale behind it, let's look at those tools and see. You can see the vast majority of tasks in one of these projects, they don't even do. And those that they do tend to be highly manual. And when they're highly manual, that puts all the onus on you. Puts all the onus on you doing the labor-intensive tasks or writing scripts, or working with lots of people to get it done. Lots of points of failure potential on this list. As I said, it's way too manually intensive, and this is why the migration manager is perceived as the worst job in IT. No one likes this job, and basically there's a lack of automation. It's a thankless job. You have to do lots of scripting. There tends to be lots of human errors because it's so manual. There tends to be a lot of redos. It becomes a time sink, consuming huge amounts of time and overtime. And it demands a lot of expertise on the part of the admin or a large number of file migration pros. At the end, it costs a lot of money. You don't get thanked when you do it well, and you catch hell when you do it wrong, when there are problems, and there are almost always problems. Here's some essential file migration and mobility project points to remember. They're not fixed. It's a continuously moving target. What's scoped and defined or sized up front is going to change ongoing. It's constantly evolving. The files are always in flux. And the longer it takes to do the project, the more they're in flux. So the shares, the files, and the size are always going to increase. And the target shares will change. All that leads to more money and more time. Just a note about scripting, just some common notes. A lot of people pride themselves on their ability to write scripts, and that's good. Being talented at writing scripts will never hurt you. However, scripting can cause, and usually does, serious errors. And let's look at the rationale behind it. What's your process for quality assurance? How often do you provide system and microcode updates? Because things in the environment are always changing, especially when you talk about infrastructure and software that you're working with. The script bug process, how does that work? How well are you documenting it? What is your process for updating and upgrading? And when the original author who wrote the script leaves for another job internally or externally, who's going to manage that script? And usually what happens is it's going to get rewritten. So unless you're in the business of software, odds are you don't have the professional processes required for software development. And candidly, that's what a script is. What about that spreadsheet intensity? Yeah, but you've always done it that way. That doesn't mean it's right. Spreadsheets always lead to errors. I mean, the amount of cooperation, communication, and coordination between different people and tasks, the thing you have to ask yourself, gee, that's always up to date. Yeah, I always make sure I put everything in that spreadsheet, right? And everybody does the same. It's always up to date. No, it's never up to date. And there's always stuff missing, and that leads people doing the same thing multiple times. Not a great way to manage a project. And at the end, you can't forget the post-migration aspect, the testing and the validation. You got to test and validate everything, whether it's the application access and permissions or the client access and permissions or the SID mapping, and that's always fun, or the inevitable human errors that you got to go back and fix. All of it's labor intensive, right? You got to test, validate, fix, and repeat. It's like washing your hair. Wash, rinse, repeat. You got to do the same thing here. So what does this mean to the business? Well, you're going to have more risk. You're going to have security risk and you're going to have cost risk. It's going to happen no matter what you do with these tools, with these common tools, you're going to have more risk. And that ultimately means that the way you mitigate the risk is with more experience. But when you have more experience, well, that means the pros tend to be more expensive, yourself or the external ones. And you will have less errors. It just costs you more, but you're still going to have errors and you're still going to have risk. What about those budget-busting causes? Well, in no particular order, as you can see, there are quite a few of them. Anything from professional services or personnel to the system capacity overlap while you have both systems in place, paying for maintenance in both systems, paying lease costs or amortization costs on both of them at the same time. You're going to have that errors and the outages, and it's just not pretty. There's a reason why this is the worst job in the IT data center. Here are the workarounds. And I know some of you are thinking, oh, but I got this solved. One of the most common workarounds, I'm going to do NAS and NAS replication. Great. If you're staying with the same model or the next generation of that model, mostly, then I can replicate between them, right? Well, in many cases, that's system specific. I'll give you cases where you've gone to the latest generation of the same model, but it still won't work with the old model. And I'm looking at you, some major vendors out there. It's not always the way you expect it to be. And it's definitely not vendor to vendor. And then you get server-to-server replication. Now, that's a great possibility, but you've got to duplicate the physical or virtual or both to be able to use that methodology. You can use different storage, but you're going to have a lot of server hardware at the end of the day that's passive and waiting to be used for this, and then you got to get rid of it or repurpose it. It's a lot of duplicate systems and infrastructure at the end of the day. Then you have hypervisor virtual machine replication. Again, that works great within that hypervisor. But when you have different hypervisors from different vendors, they don't work between each other. And file backup is another way to get this done. Hey, file backup has been used for years. Now, I can back up the files. The problem with that is I got to recover the data to move the data. And you typically have very large RPOs, and it can be error prone. So at the end of the day, these are all workarounds. They all have positives. They all have negatives too, and they can be costly. There really has to be a better way. And in a moment, I'm going to have Kwong Lee come up and talk about the better way, but I'm going to end with a story. Einstein's Chauffer. Many of you know that Einstein was one of the most renowned physicists in our history. Brilliant man. Came up with the theory of relativity, known as the father of modern physics. But towards the end of his career, he was on the speaking circuit, the rubber chicken circuit. He really wasn't doing a lot of work. He was doing a lot of speaking because he was a celebrity at that point. And he gave the same speech most of the places he went to, and he was getting pretty tired of it. And he said something to his chauffeur. And the chauffeur said, well, sir, I've heard your speech 1,000 times. I know it by heart. I know all the questions they ask. I could give it for you. And he says, he starts thinking about it. He goes, well, they're going to know you're my chauffeur. He says, no, sir, I look a lot like you at this point. All I can do, I'll wear your clothes, you wear mine. They'll think I'm you. Einstein thought about it for a minute. He says, okay, let's do it. So they go to the speech, and sure enough, the chauffeur gives the speech exactly the same way Einstein does, including all his mannerisms. Gets to the end, and the questions start, and it's the same questions he's always heard, and he answers them the same way Einstein answered them. But towards the end, this one guy stands up, and he wants to show how smart he is, so he starts this very long and convoluted question. And he gets to the end, and he asks the question, and the chauffeur nods his head, says, very interesting, but you know, that is such a simple question, I'm going to let my chauffeur answer it in the back of the room. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Kwong Lee, since he's the real Einstein of the outfit, and he's going to explain to you a better way.
All right, thank you very much, Mark. So as Mark was describing, NAS file migrations are a nightmare, and they don't have to be a nightmare anymore when you're using StorageX. So as Mark mentioned earlier, although 84% of the time, most file migration and mobility projects will fail, StorageX reduces that to less than 1%. So today, I'm going to cover StorageX. I'm going to talk about how StorageX eliminates file migration and mobility problems, various use cases, business justification, proof points, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end. StorageX is designed to eradicate NAS file migration and mobility nightmares. The software is architected from the ground up to be fast. That means that it facilitates successful projects, it automates processes, it stops and eliminates mistakes, trim and mitigate risk, time, and cost. StorageX eliminates file migration and mobility complexity, all based on policy-based automation and management. What this does is this eliminates the deep file migration expertise and skills that's required, the set of scripting that has to be created for all of the different data migration activities, and also eliminates the spreadsheet intensity in managing migration projects. StorageX simply works. It integrates and automates discovery, policy-based data movement and copies, security, organic data movers. And this works with all of your major storage vendors, all your major NAS vendors, as well as also supports industry standards such as SMB and NFS. StorageX out-of-band simplifies and accelerates file mobility and management. So starting from the middle, what StorageX is delivered on is it can be installed on a Windows server, and that Windows server can either be a virtual machine or it can be a physical server. The StorageX server itself manages the whole entire migration process and the file mobility process, stores that information, provides quality of service controls over the environment, provides a console for the storage administrator to be able to create policies and manage the data migration process, and also has file insight capabilities, which gives you information about when files were created, what file types you have, when they were last accessed, when they were modified. The StorageX server communicates with a number of Windows and Linux scale-out replication agents. These are the actual data movers. This is what actually moves the data from the source over to the target. StorageX gives them instructions in terms of when they should be scheduled, when they should be running, how the data copies are going to be done, and how to transform the data. Over the left side, you see the source data. This could be a set of different heterogeneous vendor environments. It could be Windows servers. It could be Linux or Unix servers. It could be cloud storage. It's anything that has an SMB or NFS interface. Over on the target side, the same thing is true there. It can be any set of NAS vendors. It can be Windows servers, Linux servers, cloud services, and so forth. When StorageX copies the data, what we do is we ensure that the data is copied, the metadata is all copied, and the permissions are all copied. We also provide the capability of doing SID mapping. Now, in the situations where you're working with a NAS vendor that we have API integration with, such as NetApp, 7-mode, clustered data on tap, EMC Isilon, EMC VNX, what StorageX is able to do is to discover the set of volumes, queue trees, tree quota structure that you have over on the source. And over on the target, what StorageX will do is we'll provision the NetApp filers or the EMC filers with the information that we've gotten from the source. And so now this fully automates the entire process end to end. So how StorageX compares versus common tools. Marc mentioned earlier all the steps that have to be done in a migration and mobility project. StorageX gives you complete file migration and mobility. It automates and supports end-to-end from everything from planning to verification. It delivers enterprise-class file migration and mobility. Now, how does StorageX data protection compare versus common tools? You know, as Marc talked about earlier, there's a number of management tasks that has to be done when you're doing copying of data and just keeping data in sync with one another. StorageX simplifies all of this, where we provide GUI assistance as well as automation of the management of the task. StorageX is heterogeneous in terms of vendors or systems. It can work with local storage, remote storage, or cloud storage. StorageX also supports a number of different topologies, from one-to-one, one-to-many, or many-to-one, and this is a vast improvement over what you get with file copy and sync tools. So file migration mobility problems solved, by StorageX are, one, StorageX helps you optimize your environment. And optimizing your environment, this would be doing things such as helping you with your tech refreshes, helping you with consolidation of your file systems, or being able to do performance tuning use cases. StorageX also provides the ability for you to standardize. In the standardization, you support heterogeneous management over a number of different file environments, as well as being able to, in a very standard way, grow your environment, provision your environment, and manage that. StorageX also gives you the ability to be more agile. And you can do this with the adoption of technology, whether it's the adoption of cloud technology or other brand new technology, as well as gives your business more agility in terms of being able to handle and manage mergers and acquisitions and divestitures. From a risk mitigation, StorageX helps with providing replication of the data and disaster recovery, but also helps with security management of the permissions on filers. So here's a visualization on tech refresh and consolidation. In a legacy file migration and mobility project, what happens is that there's the IT staff and the vendor staff that are working first to discover and scope what is out in the environment. Typically, this process takes quite a bit of time. An example I'll use is that, let's say in the customer environment, they were a DFS user, and that they had number of Windows shares and NFS exports and so forth. So there's work that has to be done to be able to understand what all the namespace links are, take a dump of that information, and then take a look at what all the shares and exports are, and then take a copy of that data. And then what you would do is you would do the reconciliation in Spreadsheet to determine which namespace elements are pointing to which share and export, and then you would have to use tools to determine how large each of these are. And then you start doing planning. And in the planning, what you would do is you would start breaking up all the different shares and exports that you wanted to migrate into a different set of cutover windows. From there, you would go through the process of doing each of the different migrations and cutovers for each chunk that you have. With that, you would have to go deep into that file system, into that share and export, and understand what's there. Then you would have to go do planning as well as script writing and updating spreadsheets on the migration you're about to do, actually copy the data, and then from there do cleanup, and then you repeat. And you continue to do so until you reach the end. And once you reach the end, you have to make sure that all of the data has been migrated off of the source and is now on the target. And from that point forward, you can go ahead and decommission the source. So Data Dynamics automates this entire process. So with Data Dynamics automation, the discovery is built into the software itself. So it discovers and it shows you the shares and exports and the relationships between the namespaces and the shares, for example. Planning is done very simply. There are some planning wizards where you can go ahead and specify what are the different set of policies that you want created, all the provisioning that you need to be done, and how you want to divide up this work over a number of different cutovers. Then when it comes down to the execution of the migrations, StorageX does the discovery to see what's changed, to see what the data is, does the migration for you, and does the cleanup for you. This helps you make faster file migration and mobility projects. It reduces your risk, it increases productivity, and it lowers your expense and cost. So some financial justification around this. Faster and simpler migrations accelerate savings and productivity to the tune of a reduction of the overall migration times by 50%, which leads to a cost savings of about 50%. And this is due to the increased productivity in your staff by 2x to 5x. So these are real significant enhancements. Now, StorageX provides you a comprehensive consolidation capability. And what this is that you can go and consolidate any level of the filer in terms of whether it's the NAS filer, it's the volumes, it's queue trees or tree quotas, it's filer directory or shares or exports, and you can move that to any different level in the hierarchy for a consolidation. Or you can also do a breakout if you need to be able to split shares or exports or split out files. You can do all that with StorageX. You can also do tiered performance with StorageX. You can do this at an entire share and export level. You can do this from a volume perspective. You can move files to different shares and export. You can base which files get picked for moving across the tiers based on its name, based on its age, based on various path criteria. StorageX provides you a single console where you can do heterogeneous storage management. So from this console, you can see all the file shares and exports that are out in your environment, the file servers, the network attached storage, and the cloud. By doing so, what you'll be able to do in a very common method is be able to discover the shares and exports, be able to create shares and exports, and be able to clone them. In addition, we also can give you information about what are the various storage containers, such as the volumes and the queue trees and tree quota structures, and also allow you to be able to move or split file systems or do load balancing. Now, from a growth and provisioning, here's how you would use StorageX to help you with that. As you bring in brand new NAS storage or you add capacity through it, StorageX can go and create the volumes, create the directory structures, the shares and exports for you. This is for general growth. And then you can rebalance your environment where if you have filers that are almost full in terms of the capacity, you can go ahead and move certain shares or exports or directories over to the brand new filer. You can move data to and from the cloud using StorageX. StorageX supports any cloud target or any filer, whether it's on-premise, off-premise, whether it's siloed, as long as it has an SMB and NFS interface. And so StorageX helps you reduce the risk in that you can move data up to the cloud. You can move data from the cloud back in on-premise. You can move from one cloud vendor to another cloud vendor. From a mergers and acquisition perspective, one of the big challenges that customers have is that as they take two different companies and they merge it into one company, you'll have a couple of things. One is you need to copy the files from the company that's been acquired over to the new company, but you'll also have security access and permissions from users at the old company. So let's say you have user at old company, and they have a certain SID that's associated with a file or folder. When that gets copied over to your final environment, StorageX can automatically update user at old company to user at new company. And so now you have a very clean file system and file permissions for your acquired companies. From a divestiture perspective, StorageX can break out the files that are in scope to be divested and put it onto filers that are in scope to be divested. And from there, it can isolate access and make sure that only the people who are part of the divestiture will be the ones who have access to this, so that this makes it very easy to break out that data and make it ready for either a spin-off or acquisition by someone else. From a security management perspective, StorageX copies the file permissions and ACL information. But we also provide capabilities of cloning share permissions and cloning export policies. And when we do so, all of the access permissions that you had over in the source side, you're going to be able to have over in the target side. StorageX can also remove access in terms of deleting share permissions and deleting export policies, and can be used to help clean up permissioning in the repermission projects by copying files, but setting brand new permissions over on the target side, and the copied files inheriting the new permissions. Some other examples here is that StorageX can remove invalid SIDs. An invalid SID happens when a user is removed from the Active Directory. So let's say they're no longer working with the company, but the file system still shows that they have access to those files. StorageX can automatically remove the invalid SIDs for you to clean up your file system, so the only people who should have access are the ones who are shown as having permissions in the file system. StorageX also provides SID mapping capabilities, so that what you'll be able to do is you can change who has access to files, or you can also do SID cleanups, like removing SID history levels, or by doing the merger and acquisition example I used earlier, where you're switching from old SID over to new SID. All this helps with governance and compliance and access control risk management. From a disaster recovery perspective, StorageX can help you manage your disaster recovery for DFS environments. StorageX backed up your DFS namespaces to make sure that if there's any type of issues with corruption with the namespace, you can restore from it. StorageX also makes sure that if you have multiple DFS namespaces with links that are supposed to be the same, StorageX can replicate the links between the source and the targets to make sure that those links remain the same if you update the links on any of the DFS namespaces. But more importantly, StorageX can monitor the replication that's happening between your source storage to your target storage. And as it's monitoring that, if there's any disruptions, StorageX can go ahead and initiate a failover where we update the DFS links to point to the target volume. And when the source volume is back up, StorageX can then replicate the data back to the source, and then from there can do a fail back to it. From a replication management perspective, there's a number of different use cases with this. So one of the use cases is, how do you maintain DR readiness while you're transitioning to different technologies? And an example I'll use is a NetApp 7-mode system, update and upgrade over to a clustered on tap system. One of the challenges that you'll have with that is that you can only do snap mirror relationships for disaster recovery between systems of the similar level and similar architecture. So even with NetApp, as you're going from 7 mode to cluster mode, you cannot have a snap mirror relationship between them unless they're all exactly the same architecture. So if you wanted to have the same environment, you would have to have all these in cluster data on tap in order for you to be able to upgrade these three. StorageX allows you a transition capability, where StorageX can help you first go ahead and convert the 7-mode system and migrate that data over a clustered data on tap system, and then help you maintain disaster recovery readiness by doing the replication between the 7-mode systems to the clustered systems to the other 7-mode systems. Now, once you've completed upgrading and updating all of your 7-mode systems over to clustered on tap systems, StorageX can then initiate Snap Mirror to be used to provide you the same level of capability in disaster recovery that you had with the 7-mode systems, but now with cluster data on tap. Now, cluster data on tap and NetApp 7-mode here was an example. This could be any set of vendor technology as you're moving from one vendor to another. So it's heterogeneous. It could be used for transitioning from, let's say, Windows file servers or Linux file servers over to NAS filers. Anytime that you need to do a transition from one technology to another and you need to maintain disaster recovery readiness, StorageX can help. StorageX provides heterogeneous SMB and NFS replication. So we do things from simple share to share or export to export. We can do multiple target support, and we can do cascading replication support. Some use case examples of that would be if you had a remote office, StorageX could replicate the data from the remote office over to your center office, whether it's a NAS or a Windows file share or a Linux file share. When you're doing migrations, one of the things that's really critical is track the changes in your filers and track changes in your system. StorageX provides the capability for you to monitor and report on what changes are happening into your filers. So you can take a copy of the initial configuration of the filer, so all the shares are there, all the exports that are there, all the queue trees, quotas, and so forth. And all throughout the migration process, we can take pictures of the interim configuration of the filer, and we can tell you what the changes are, what the deltas are, as you're going through this. And so as new shares and exports show up over on the source side or quotas are changed, you can use StorageX to make sure that you capture all of that in your migration project. Now, very importantly, when you get towards the end, if you've completed your migration and thought you've completed your migration, you want to do a verification of final configuration before you dispose of the filer. StorageX can tell you if there was any changes from the time that you finished your migration to now, so that you don't accidentally dispose of assets that has data on it. This is another way in which StorageX helps you reduce risk and ensures that there's a level of predictability in your environment. Other things that StorageX does to help you manage your environment is that we have scheduling and cutover estimation. So you can visualize and manage key StorageX tasks and scheduling. So here you have an example of a StorageX scheduling window. And in that window, what you'll see is all the different tasks that you have, from reporting, phase migrations, replications, cutovers, archives that you're running, monitoring, discovery, namespace backup, namespace availability. You see all that information, and you can also choose to see this from a source and destination perspective. And what you'll see here is, you'll have the various different source and destination. So you see all the systems that are impacted by any one of the policies. You can drag and drop to change the times and when these are scheduled, but you also get this visualization of what's happening on any specific filer at any time. Now, one of the most critical tasks that you'll do is planning for cutovers. Cutover is the only time that there's going to be disruption over to the users. This is a time where you need to switch users from the old storage over to the new storage. This is our cutover scheduling and estimation plan. And what you do is you specify the cutover window. So you have the beginning of your cutover window, and you have the end of your cutover window. Now, for each of the policies that you selected for being cut over, what StorageX does is it shows you in 3 colors bars that represent how long they'll take. Green bars, yellow bars, and red bars. The green bars represent that these tasks, these jobs, can run within the window and can be completed within the window. And it estimates how long that will take based on the last number of incremental copies that we've done. Yellow bars, such as these, represent that we've never run incremental copy with these, so we don't have an estimate of how long this will take. And then what StorageX will do is it will show you all the different bars as it lines up within the cutover window, and anything that's going to miss the cutover window is going to highlight in red. So those are the ones that you can take action with, and you can move them into another cutover window. You can take actions such as adding additional server capacity in order to be able to help that. And StorageX gives you an estimated completion time. So this gives you predictability. It sets the expectations in terms of what you need, and it'll give you exactly the points that you'll need to be able to negotiate with the lines of businesses and how long of a migration window is required. Another thing StorageX does to give you predictability and predictable results is our policy simulation mode. So our policies that specify how you want to do the file migration, how you want to copy the files, what actions you want done. StorageX can run them in simulation mode, where we'll tell you, here are the list of all the files that are going to be copied, all the ones that are going to be transformed, meaning changed, whether it's changed from a permissions perspective or changed in any other way, and what are the files that are going to be excluded. So there will be no surprises. You know exactly what is going to be copied from source to target and what's going to be excluded. This gives you a real good estimate on the total size of file data that you have and the set of data migration requirements that you have so that you can estimate how long these projects will take. This gives you a level of predictability and risk reduction. So some real-world results with StorageX. So file migration mobility project times are improved to the tune of 50% and 75% many times in an SMB environment. You'll see productivity increase to 2x to 5x. You'll see much lower cost. And a much lower cost comes from shorter transition times, faster decommissioning of old storage, faster time to value of new storage, less labor costs via automation and productivity. And we greatly reduce risks. And we do so by making sure there's no or nominal user impact during the file copy and synchronization process. We had the shortest cutover time period. This minimizes impact on our customers. The automation reduces touches, and when you reduce touches, you reduce opportunity for error introduction. So let me give you some financial cost savings comparison between doing things the manual method and the StorageX method. Here I have a 20 terabyte example, and what you'll see is this is the amount of time required in terms of people years and how long migrations will take, how long they'll take in terms of calendar time, and then, the estimated costs of what the migration labor would look like, and the overlap in terms of how much that will cost. And overlap is for 20 terabytes that you're doing migration, you're going to have 20 terabytes of source storage consumed, and you're going to have 20 terabytes of target storage held up. So for 20 terabytes of actual data, you actually are holding up 40 terabytes in your environment. That has cost. And that cost will be there until you're able to repurpose the source 20 terabytes or you're able to decommission that. And so StorageX provides you $20,000 in savings, around roughly 50% of your migration costs. In terms of time, which is a more critical factor, StorageX saves you 2 to 3 months. And that's 86% of the time saved. Now, from a terabytes moved, one of the real interesting facts about data migration is when you look at a weekly perspective of how much data changes in a week, it's only about 0.5%. 0.5% doesn't sound like very much. Over time, though, the longer you take, the more data actually gets created or gets changed, the more data you actually have to move. And that's the moving goalpost or moving target that Mark talked about earlier. Now, a 100 terabyte example, you'll see more significant set of savings in terms of $200,000 in cost savings, 61% in terms of reduction of cost, and a reduction of about 4 months in terms of times to do the migration, or about 73% of the time saved. From a terabytes move perspective, you'll see that StorageX moves 6 terabytes less. Now, these savings get even bigger when you look at larger amounts of data. So for a petabyte typically takes in the manual method about 5 people for a year to migrate. These are the sets of costs that you'll be looking at, but StorageX is now saving you in the tune of $2 million, or 62% of your costs. It's saving you, more importantly, 8 months. When you think about time and the time saved, with money, if you have higher costs, you can always recover your costs in terms of additional business revenue and so forth. Time is one of those resources that once spent, once lost, can never be recovered. And so time is always a very important and critical factor for our customers. In terms of terabytes moved, because of the fact that we're moving in 8 months less time, the amount of data that StorageX is moving is 213 terabytes less than what you would have had to move with the manual method. And this is precisely the reason why that so many file migration projects fail. It's because if you think about the target keeps moving and the amount of data that keeps on getting generated, you're always playing catch-up. With StorageX, you don't have to worry about that catch-up game because you get the migrations done quicker. And in a 3 petabyte example, this is where you'll see real significant times, where if you think about the overall savings of 67%, but you think about the time saved, 2 years worth, that's significant. But what's happened in those 2 years? I mean, if you look at if you were doing this migration via the manual method, you would have moved that data twice. Where if you look at doing it with StorageX, you're going to move 2.5 petabytes less data. So that's a 39% savings. So the larger the environment you have, the more petabytes that you have, the more critical and the bigger the savings that you have from automation. Now, I gave you some industry examples here. We offer free customized migration cost savings analysis. You can see what StorageX does for you. So you can contact us today at sales@datadyn.com, and we're more than happy to do a custom analysis for you. Now, what does agility mean? So agility means that we can help you respond to changing business dynamics. We talked about the mergers and acquisitions and so forth, but it's also from a new IT model adoption. So everything from the cloud, how cloud storage, distributed NAS, and so forth. And what StorageX is able to do is we're able to help you migrate the data to those services, but also back from those services, and that reduces risk. We help you adopt technology quicker. This gives you overall faster time to market. From a risk mitigation perspective, StorageX gives you better security in terms of helping you govern and comply with your environment, and it manages your risk with access control. It helps you be prepared. It gives you the tools to have your business continue continuity. It gives you file data protection from local disasters and reduces DR costs and reduces DR time. It also helps provide you greater availability, reducing the outage cost. From a standardization, the value that you see there, and this is just general purpose standardization, is that we increase file storage management productivity by 2x. And this is just providing from standardized, common, and single management console, giving you policy-based automation and reporting, and scheduling and planning capabilities. We also provide you the ability to reduce vendor lock-in. And what this means is that we're giving you heterogeneous support management. We're giving you the ability to be able to discover and provision different vendors. And we're giving you the ability for heterogeneous data movement. So some example customer proof points. So we have a very satisfied customer who's already moved 2 petabytes of data from Isilon to NetApp, and they've moved more than 180 million files. They're very happy about using StorageX because they were able to do this without outages or loss of permissions. They view StorageX as very simple and easy to use. We have a large European bank, who tried to do and use StorageX, and they said it's so simple. It's like child's play. They even have some of their lines of businesses doing their own cutovers. And that's a real interesting point as well, because one of the capabilities that StorageX has is that we provide API capabilities. It's a REST-based API where customers can integrate with their line of business applications, the ability to be able to manage data, to be able to manage their own cutovers, and manage their own data mobility. A large US insurance company was a very heavy NetApp 7 mode environment, and they needed to move to cluster data on tap. They didn't see any way to be able to do it until they found StorageX. Said StorageX was a must-have because it drastically sped up migrations, reduced operational risk, and exceeded their requirements. Now, impact, there's a large insurance company that has already moved 1.8 billion files over a 6-month period. I mean, think about 1.8 billion files and what that would take in the manual method. We have a cloud service provider who moved 325 terabytes, which were 500 million files in 1 month. No other product could get them there. Everything else was taking multiple months or much longer for them to be able to do. StorageX was able to do that in a month. Now, one of the processes that we have, the cutover is real critical because during the cutover, this is when you're going to be experiencing a potential outage to your user community. StorageX was able to do a cutover in an hour. The next best product took more than 24 hours. Some of it took multiple days. So just imagine what that means. Imagine negotiating with your line of business and saying, we can probably get your cutover done in about an hour and a half, 2 hours, because we know StorageX can get it done in an hour. Or would you rather have the conversation saying, I'm going to need 2 or 3 days of outage in order for you to be able to do this cutover? So this is a game changer. This is one of the real critical things that StorageX is able to do. From a history perspective, StorageX has been in the marketplace for 14 years. It's a proven technology. It was started with NewView, it was invested in by Brocade, and Data Dynamics acquired the IP from Brocade. And with it, we added a number of different enhancements to really help you with all the file migration and mobility needs. We've been recognized in the industry with Product of the Year awards and MVP awards based on our capabilities. File migration and mobility problems solved. No more nightmares. With StorageX and our policy engine and our capabilities, we help you optimize your environment, standardize it, provide you business agility, and risk mitigation. At this time, I'd like to turn this back to Mark for Q&A.
Thanks, Kwang. We did have some questions coming in. For those of you who want to ask some questions, you'll see a Q&A box in the lower right-hand part of the screen. Please feel free to ask any questions you want. There are no dumb questions. There are only dumb answers. But here are some of the questions that have come in during the webinar. Kwang, how does StorageX migrate data faster? Wouldn't the limitations of data copy come down to your network speed?
A very good question out there. StorageX makes migration projects faster. It does not copy data faster. Ultimately, StorageX will be bound by speed of network and file storage resources. What makes StorageX speed up the migration projects are, first, we have an end-to-end workflow process automation built around policies. The work is done in the policies. For example, in a traditional approach, simply finding out relationships between DFS links, source file shares, and target storage capacities may take several days, weeks, months. The second thing is that StorageX summarizes data copy operations and reports on the errors. So in the traditional approach, you'd be running scripts and you'd be searching logs and looking at what the issues are. You might be building log analysis scripts and other things to determine what the issues are. With StorageX, you don't have to worry about that. StorageX reports on what exact issues are. The third thing is that StorageX maintains its own infrastructure. StorageX deploys additional data movement engines, our replication agents, as you need it. And StorageX also manages the workload. So now you don't have to do all the quality of service controls, or you don't have to do all of the management of robocopy servers or rsync servers. StorageX manages all of its own infrastructure for you. And then also StorageX provides a clear information on the cutovers that you need to do, the plan for the cutover windows. We help you allow coordination of what would have been multiple different teams, all being done in the software. And StorageX also helps you automate communications. We have email communication capabilities where we can notify people of any type of changes in the environment or the status of their migrations.
Sounds good. Got another question that's come in. What are the user disruptions and impact I should expect with StorageX?
StorageX is designed to minimize user impact and disruptions. StorageX, first of all, is out of band, so we're not in the data path, so we're not going to be impacting users' access to the source storage. The other thing that we do is we provide a quality of service throttling capability, and what this does is we ensure that we have lower migration impact during busy work hours, and then we will do more migrations and move more data during nights and weekend hours where you don't have as much people accessing the systems. The other thing that we do is that the only time that you really have impact in terms of outages is at the cutovers. StorageX minimizes that impact by providing a clear estimate on how long the cutover will take for the policy. It's the fastest final copy incremental in the industry. You know, and I use the example where jobs that were taking more than 24 hours can be done in an hour. And then also we have DFS namespace and auto mounts integration, where if you're using those type of environments, StorageX can automatically update them at completion of cutover. So now you don't have to wait until the DFS administrator or the auto mount administrator are on to update that. And of course, also StorageX can invoke automation batch scripts to take actions such as restarting servers on your behalf. So you have an end-to-end platform here that can help you with all the various different steps in minimizing user disruptions.
Now, another question's come in. It says, when StorageX is tiering, where is that data going, and how does the user find it or access it?
Yeah, very good question there, Mark. So StorageX can tier, full shares or export. In that case, the user can go to the new location of where those shares and exports are. If you're using a DFS environment, StorageX can go ahead and repoint those links to the new location for you, so there would be no impact over the client. In cases where you're tiering paths or files, the administrator would specify the source path to be scanned, the target path where older data should go, and then the users can go to the target path location in order to find the files that they have that have been archived.
How does StorageX help me estimate and scope a migration project?
Yeah, very good question, because you want to be able to do a good job at scoping the migration project, so you know how long it's going to take. You can set up predictability, you know what set of resources are required. So StorageX provides you capabilities, based on, first we have a file insight capability where you can do granular file level discovery and reporting. We also give you resource baseline reports where we can show you the configuration of the environment and what's happening. We can tell you about your DFS namespace and give you reports about that. We can tell you about connections, and what's happening over in that environment. We also give you the policy simulation mode, which I talked about a little bit earlier, and that gives you the capability of understanding what is going to be copied, what's not going to be copied, how many total files that you are with that. And then, when you've already are in flight doing the migration, we tell you how long the cutover planning is going to be and how long that's going to take. So that gives you that perspective as well.
I have one last question that's come in, and by the way, if any of you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to ask. We will answer them. How can I integrate file mobility into my business processes?
Yeah, that's another good question. I brought this up a little bit earlier when I was talking about that large European bank. But StorageX 7.8 provides a REST API. And the reason why we provide that API is it gives you the ability to be able to create and execute policies. So some example use cases for this is that, one is you can integrate StorageX into your IT self-service portal. So you can have the line of business specify all their data assets onto your CMDB. And then what you can do is you can have the line of business be able to request different levels of service or different migration projects or when they want cutovers to be done. And you can integrate that with StorageX, where StorageX will implement that for you. You can also automate file workload redistribution. So this is a situation where a filer or a share may be getting full and you don't have enough space or capacity. You can automate that and use the StorageX APIs to move the data over to a different filer that has additional capacity. Other things that you can do is you can use our APIs to make copies of data. That copy of data could be used for analytics and legal discovery and a number of other use cases.
Sounds very good, Kwang. Well, thank you all for attending. That's the end of our Q&A. If you'd like to hear this again or have other people hear it, it will be on Data Dynamics website, and you will have access to it. For more information, go to datadynamics.com or contact sales at datadyn.com. Thank you again. Have a great day.